North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. We report the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary, which is not the news. Strangely enough, this is one person in one of these seats somewhere in America that does not believe, because he's not imperious and egocentric and hubris-filled, that my opinion is actually news. It is not. I'm not the Oracle of Delphi. I'm your neighbor. I'm just trying to tell you what I think is the most important thing for you to know based on today's news. And then we can debate whether any of that is real. Once again, news, analysis, commentary, debate. This is the Wells Report. Hi, I'm John David Wells. I forgot to take off my sunglasses. They're still hanging around my neck. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on 21 days before the midterm elections. 21 days. Have you figured out who you are going to vote for yet? Do you believe the country is doing just fine and you want to stay the course? Do you believe that the country is not doing just fine and you want deep change? Give us a call and tell me. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. If you want deep change, that would mean you're turning toward the Republican Party. Do you have faith? Do you have faith that they would be able to affect that change? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. So, do you believe the country is in need of change? Have you figured out who you're going to vote for? If you do believe it's going to need to be changed, are you willing to vote for a Republican, and do you believe that they would do anything? I don't know. Have I figured out who I'm going to vote for? Yes, I have. I'm not going to announce it, but I figured out who I'm going to vote for several different races. And moreover, I've also thought about what kind of people I'm going to vote for. You already know the answer to that. You already know the answer to that. The answer is that I'm going to vote for people that are like my neighbors instead of people that are like Mitch McConnell. I'm tired of institutional politicians. I'm absolutely tired of them. I'm going to find people that aren't. I'm going to find people. Well, there's a really good example. Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker is a capable man. He is not a politician. He is a capable man who can hold his own with politicians. That's the kind of person I'm looking for. Gender, by the way, is not necessary. There are a lot of females that are out there that are equally neighborly as opposed to politically, if you get that drift. And so I have a pretty good idea of who I'm going to vote for in the next 21 days. Now, who am I going to vote for in 2024? Let's see. By the way, you were asking about a debate in Georgia. Herschel Walker, a debate in Georgia. He was never going to be able to make that debate. It wasn't that he skipped it. It was that he was not available. And Raphael Warnock tried to make everybody think that he had skipped it, which is not the case. Okay, so he was unavailable that day for that debate. That was reported by a couple of different sources, and once again, it was twisted politically by what appears to be a twisted media, a media that is biased. You know, I ask you these questions. Do you believe the country's going in the right track? Do you believe that it's in need of our course is in need of change? I ask if you believe that indeed, if you do look for change, are you willing to entrust that belief in the Republican Party? Do you think they'll do anything? But I'll tell you one thing you don't have to talk about. The mainstream media is all in for the Democrat Party. That's it. They are all in for the Democrat Party. You do not have a news source. You don't have a news source. Everybody is playing politics. Everyone. I am reporting the news, so I guess if you're here, then you know there is a news source. But, I'm just a little mouse in the corner. Hopefully we can do something about that. But yeah, I'm just a little mouse in the corner. Somebody out there in the wilderness saying, "Hey, people, we got trouble." But that's okay. The people that hear it. The people that don't. I'm not going to say who I'm going to vote in 2024 either, but there are people that are angling. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. And there is an op-ed piece today that's in USA Today. It is by Ingrid Jacques, okay? And she writes this. Ron DeSantis created a firestorm in September when he sent 2 plane loads of migrants from Texas to Martha's Vineyard. Yet that's not all Florida Republican governors succeeded in doing. He got the nation talking about immigration. Well, so did Greg Abbott. But anyway, let's move on. And the immigration crisis, the country in August surpassed a record 2 million undocumented migrants crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. DeSantis got the country talking about him. He knows how to push liberal buttons. His ability to dominate a news cycle starts debates rivaled only by former President Donald Trump, who set a new standard for combative politics. In other words, this particular column is about whether or not Ron DeSantis can supplant Donald Trump as the leader of the Republican Party. Do you think that's possible? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Do you think Ron DeSantis has what it takes to take over the Republican Party from Donald Trump? Yes or no? And why? 817-379-2172. Very much interested in hearing what you have to say. Do you believe that Ron DeSantis can supplant Donald Trump as the leader of the Republican Party? Alicia says no. Why, Alicia? Why don't you think he can supplant Donald Trump for the leadership of the Republican Party? Why? Why do you think that's the case? Let's see. Yeah, Ron DeSantis, Gail is talking a little bit about the border and that triumvirate of governors that I've been talking about, specifically Ron DeSantis, Greg Abbott, and Doug Ducey in Arizona. All they did was show the American border, the American people, our border was wide open. The Democrats kept saying there was no crisis at the border. Ron DeSantis, Greg Abbott, Doug Ducey showed Americans there is a crisis at the border. Democrats did not want them in their state. Right. After bravely standing up in front of countless crowds of people and saying, we are a sanctuary city. If an undocumented people come to the United States, they can come here and we will give them comfort and succor. Until they actually showed up. And then suddenly, oh my God, what are you doing? Started declaring emergencies. Started demanding the federal government help. My God. Well, hold on a second here. And they also, by the way, started stomping on Texas, Arizona, and Florida for sending the migrants. Well, now hang on a second here. The people that were coming to Texas, Arizona, and Florida were uninvited by virtue of the fact that you live in a sanctuary city, sanctuary county, sanctuary state. You have invited these people here. All we're doing is making that invitation real. And that's something that you're still not trying to hear anything about. By the way, didn't Biden try to keep the El Paso mayor from claiming a state of emergency in his city? Yes. Did he pay any attention to the president? No. No. The president is grasping at straws. And that takes us back to the election. They're grasping at straws. They don't have anything to win this election with. They don't. As a matter of fact, we're going to be talking about that next hour. They have nothing to win this election with. Many people believe they peaked way too soon for the 2020 election. I think they're right. I think they did peak too soon. More about that coming up a little bit later on. Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida. He is a creature of the political system. He fits into a politician mold. He fits into the professional politician mold, not the savvy, smart, okay, politically inexperienced neighbor group. Those are the people that I want to elect to government. I want to elect real people to government. I don't want to I don't want to elect people who are essentially a figment of some political advisor's imagination. I'm not interested in doing that. And so yeah. I mean, elections have consequences. We are living in them now. Yes, they absolutely do. And yes, we absolutely are. But does Ron DeSantis have a chance? I'm going to answer that question. Does Ron DeSantis have a chance to supplant Donald Trump as the de facto leader of the Republican Party? 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Gail also said, well, I guess the Democrats got what they wanted. Yeah, they sure did. They got what they wanted. And look where we are because of it. You know, even if you're a Democrat, you cannot think that this is the right thing. And if you do, by all means, call me on the telephone. Tell me why this is good. Tell me why this is good. Tell me why even the president is talking about a recession now. Now, you know, no big surprise there. No big surprise there. Everybody knew a recession was coming. In fact, that's what the Fed is trying to induce. Oh, by the way, there is news from the Fed. I will have that for you coming up a little bit later on. There's news from the Fed today, and that's coming up here in a second. But what I do want to tell you is this. The Republican Party, regardless of what is being reported in the mainstream media, is in fine shape. And with Donald Trump at the head of it. Now, this is not because I'm a Trump devotee. Yes, I voted for him twice. If I have a chance to vote for him again, I will highly consider it because, you know, I know that guy is the guy that fits the mold of people in political power that I think should have it. However, I'm also looking very hard at Mike Pompeo. Really hard at Mike Pompeo. I want to see who else is going to be involved in this, right? I want to see who is going to be involved in this. So I'm not going to say one way or another, but I have voted for Donald Trump a couple of times. And all I can say is that Donald Trump does not represent the typical de jure politician, right? So we will see. We will see what happens. You're listening to The Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for being with us today. Our telephone number again, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Getting things going first thing today. Actually, it's not the first thing, it's the afternoon, but it's first thing in my day. I have musician hours these days. Back with more in just a moment. Thanks for joining us here on The Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. If you think this show is valuable, by all means, share it with your friends. Please do. Subscribe on the platform that you're watching it on. And if, by the way, you happen to be looking at this as a podcast, first of all, sorry about all the breaks. This is also a radio broadcast. And we have to leave room for the commercials, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm planning on getting something done about that so that you don't have to worry about all that stuff. But I've got to master my video editing system that I have here. And one of the weird things about being a broadcaster is that you develop a professional language. Well, when they have all this brand new equipment that is designed for people that aren't professionals, right? Professional broadcasters, et cetera, they redo the entire language. So terms that it's like going from a PC to a Mac or from a Mac to a PC. Things are the same, but they're different, and they use different language, and you have to learn all that. And that's been a historic struggle for me. So I'm still trying to figure out how to edit everything together so that it makes more sense. So once again, if you're watching us on Vimeo, if you're watching us on Rumble and so on and so forth, hang in there. We'll get this better for you. Anyway, like I said, if you want to support the show, by all means, please do subscribe, pass it along to your friends. And if you could also do me a favor, you could say, for example, hit the like button a few times. That would be nice. Getting back to business here, the news. Conservative Twitter users pointed out something that Democrats look like they lied about years ago. In 2021, President Joe Biden, fellow Democrat lawmakers, and major media outlets attacked a new Georgia integrity law. Remember, they passed this right after the 2020 election, after assuring everybody that the election was perfect. So they changed the laws and the way they do elections. No, wait a minute. Hold on. Try to see if I can get this right. So the election was perfect, but you still changed the election laws? Why? If the election was perfect, why would you change it? Anyway, I'll just leave that there. But what happened is that Democrats were talking about the new Georgia voting law as being Jim Crow 2.0. Talk about your basic institutional racism. Once again, thrown by Democrats. What are you guys doing? What seriously, what are you doing? Jim Crow 2.0. I rolled my eyes when it came out. I just did. It's just unbelievable. Okay, it's not a voter suppression law. We knew that then. This was just dishonest rhetoric. And remember, leftist politics cannot exist without dishonesty. That's something you need to learn about leftist politics, progressive politics, socialist politics. And the Democrats need to be careful here, because the Democrats are in a situation where they're slowly being lumped into all of these other political systems that require dishonesty to succeed, or quote succeed. They never do. All right. So the Democrat Party is just right on the very fragmented, friable edge of losing their credibility about being able to tell the truth about anything. And they better be careful. So anyway, they throw this Jim Crow 2.0 regarding the Georgia voting law. Well, guess what? What happened? Chief Operating Officer of the Office of the Georgia Secretary of State, Gabriel Sterling, has announced that 2022 has broken every early voting record. Our elections team has reviewed the initial early voting numbers for day one. We know that we are north of 125,000 votes, dwarfs the previous record of 72,000 votes from the 2018 midterm first day of early voting. We'll have exact numbers in the morning. In other words, it came very, very close to doubling the number of voters that actually hit the polls. So Jim Crow 2.0, just another lie from the leftist political machine. And they've got to stop that. You're listening to The Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. You stay right there. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for being with us today. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. You can also join us on the chat room. Hope you do. Would be great to have you here. By the way, speaking of the chat room, want to say hi to Gary and Gail and Alicia. Also want to say hi to Mike. Mikey makes the show. Watching us on YouTube today. Appreciate you coming by. Let's see. Don't trust Lindsey Graham. He flip-flops around like a fish. I'm wondering what he's up to now. That calls back to something that I was talking about earlier on the show. And that is if you think that the country's on the wrong track, and 70% of us somewhere in that vicinity believe that, well, your choice is to vote for Republicans. Do you think they're going to do anything if they get that power? Yes or no, and why? I don't trust Lindsey Graham. Well, that's what Gary says. That's what Gail says. Let's see. If I understand the radio business and so on, I'd help you get back on the radio. I'd like to get back on the radio in Dallas. If you know somebody at a Dallas radio station, tell them, hey, John David's doing a great show, and we'd really like to hear it back on the radio. And I'm working on that, by the way. Let's see what else. So much of our side of things is streams and podcasts. Seems like our side is getting pushed out by mass communication by the left. Well, exactly, especially during elections. This is horrendous. It's horrendous. Let's see. Gail says, I kind of like the breaks, JD. Okay, I'm glad you do. It won't affect the live show. This radio broadcast or this broadcast is live from 2 until 5 p.m. Central Time. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch, on Rumble and on Vimeo. What I do is I have to put the video of the show, which we're recording. I have to put that up separately because I'm still having a little bit of a challenge trying to figure out how to broadcast live on Rumble. Okay, so we're doing that. Let's see, perfect state fair weather today. The State Fair of Texas is going on, and if you've never been in Texas, the State Fair of Texas is a thing. It's a thing, man. You got to go. It's like one of those state fair things that ought to be on your bucket list. Honestly, if you're watching around the country, try to figure out some time off during the fall and come to the Texas State Fair. You'll absolutely adore it. I'm a believer in science, right up to the point where scientific brains come together for things that can destroy humanity. Arguably, this happened with nuclear weapons. That happened as a way of ending the Second World War, and by golly, it worked. And fortunately, the Allies won the race to develop the nuclear weapon. If indeed the Axis powers had developed that weapon first, with Germany and their V2s, there would be no England. And the Nazis would have won the Second World War. And so, once again, even the guys that were on the crew that created that nuclear weapon had great regrets. And even though the regrets came far too late, they already created the weapon. They created the weapon, and then they felt guilty about it. Well, good and bad. Somebody would have come up with it. You have to look at all of this stuff and say, well, okay, this is the march of progress. But then there are things that we know that are unneeded to chase. In other words, we don't need to go in certain directions based on what we already know. All right, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. COVID-19, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, I happen to believe, my personal opinion, is a created biological weapon because it's perfect. It's perfect. It has a 2-week incubation period. You don't know you're sick. You are contagious, but you don't know you're sick. It kills, but not overly much. It has a little bit more of a mortality rate than, say, for example, the typical flu that happens every year. But I said that if indeed, and as I believe, this was a weapon created in the Wuhan Infectious Institute, the Infectious Institute labs, and they lost control of it. If indeed that's the case, then China is responsible for a biological attack on the entire world. And what I had said at the time was, had this virus been more deadly, we probably would be in World War III right this minute. Because it's a weapon of mass destruction. Now, nobody wants to talk about it because nobody wants to pin China. Nobody wants to pin China for losing control of a biological weapon, but it happened, in my view. That's just my opinion. Okay? This, on the other hand, what I'm about to give you, this is inexcusable based on what we know about the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And this time, we can't blame China. This time, it comes right home to the United States of America. A U.S. lab has created a hybrid super COVID virus. They tested it on mice. It killed 80% of them. Boston University scientists combined Omicron, the Omicron strain, and the original Wuhan virus strain, despite the fact that that sort of research is what was behind the COVID pandemic in the first place. See, it's not just me. Okay, my particular opinion is mine, but there are other people that believe that too. It's called gain of function research. And what they've done in a United States lab at Boston University is they have come up with a super COVID virus that has killed 80% of its test subjects. They're mice. Gain of function research, in case you have forgotten, improves the ability of a pathogen to cause disease. And the reason they do that is they're trying to find out exactly how all this works. So goes the story. They're trying to, and this is the company line on this, it's a bid to inform public health and preparedness efforts, but it can also expose people to the virus inadvertently, which, by the way, is what I think is what the COVID pandemic is all about. Professor Shmuel Shapira, a leading scientists in the Israeli government, said, quote, "This should be totally forbidden. It's playing with fire." Dr. Richard Elbright, a chemist at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey, told the DailyMail.com, "This research is a clear example of gain of function." He added, "If we are to avoid a next lab-generated pandemic, it is imperative that oversight of enhanced potential pandemic pathogen research be strengthened." The title stated that researchers from Boston and Florida combined Omicron's most dangerous element, the spike protein, and combined it with that of the original Wuhan strain. The virus uses the spike protein to latch onto and enter the cells it infects. Omicron's spike has dozens of mutations, making it particularly infectious. Now, one more time. What they've done is they've taken the Omicron strain and added it to the Wuhan strain. Now, I'm going to say something here that you will probably hear other people say in the coming weeks and months. If indeed the SARS-CoV-2 virus, the original virus that caused the COVID pandemic, was an experiment, Something that would kill, but not overly much. About the same mortality rate, a little bit more than the typical flu virus. And then all of a sudden we had this other variant, this other mutant, they say. The Omicron mutant. Well, what if that was follow-on research from the Wuhan lab? And they released it to see what would happen. And then people say, wait a minute, we can connect the dots here and we can take the Omicron spike protein and we can add it to the original virus and come up with, well, something that kills 80% of the test subjects it's tested on. Only mice. People probably would have it would probably have a much lower mortality rate than, say, for example, the mortality rate of mice if it was exposed to human beings. But like I said, if the mortality rate of the original COVID-19 virus, SARS-CoV-2, had been more deadly, we'd be fighting World War III now, right this minute. Because there would have been absolutely no way that we could avoid pinning all of this on China. The world would demand it, in fact. So what if the Omicron strain isn't just a natural mutation? What if it's follow-on research? That's too good a question to ignore. Back to the story. Let me get that switch done. There we go. When a group of mice were exposed to standard Omicron, they all survived, experienced mild symptoms, like most human beings. 80% of those exposed to the hybrid strain perished. Quote, in mice, while Omicron causes mild non-fatal infections, the Omicron S carrying virus inflicts severe disease with a mortality rate of 80%. While the spike protein is responsible for infectivity, changes to the other part of its structure determine the ability to inflict mortality, according to researchers. Dr. Ebright told DailyMail.com, the research is a clear example of gain-of-function research, and it's of concern and enhanced potential pandemic pathogen research as well. Quote, it's especially concerning this new U.S. government gain-of-function research, like the previous U.S. government gain of research on chimeric SARS-related coronaviruses at Wuhan Institute of Virology that may have caused the pandemic, appears not to have undergone the prior risk-benefit review mandated under U.S. government policies. Quote, if we are to avoid a next lab-generated pandemic, it's imperative that the oversight of gain-of-function research be strengthened. Quote, it's imperative that the existing policies mandating prior risk-benefit assessment of gain-of-function research be followed. It's imperative that officials at U.S. government agencies who repeatedly have placed the public at risk by violating the existing policies be held accountable, which is my next point. I believe, and once again, this is a personal opinion, I believe that the people responsible for the combination of this virus with the Omicron strain, I think they should all go to jail. I think they should all go to jail. I think they should all be arrested. I think they should be arrested for crimes against humanity. And they should be thrown in jail. Absolutely thrown in jail for this. Because indeed, if they did circumvent U.S. law regarding risk development, risk analysis, and why are we doing this? If they just ignored those laws and ignored that oversight, these people aren't scientists. They're mad scientists. They're terrorists. They're trying to create a perfect biological weapon. As I told you before, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, if it wasn't manufactured in a lab, other viruses were going to use the characteristics of the SARS-CoV-2 virus to be manufactured in a lab and to be weaponized. because that virus is the perfect biological weapon. If they made it more deadly, that's that. All these people ought to go to jail. Every single one of them. The very first thing, now, if we can get the DOJ to stop playing politics and actually do their flippin' jobs, what they should do is they should immediately launch an investigation into this research. The people responsible, and notice in this particular article, we know where, but we don't know who. Why don't we know who is behind this research? We know it's Boston University and some university in Florida. Why don't we know the people involved? You're listening to The Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Back with more in just a moment. This is The Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. By the way, I just tweeted that article out on my Twitter account. And I said that these people should be immediately arrested and tried for crimes against humanity. There's no reason to create this virus. A SARS coronavirus with an 80% kill rate on mice. There's no reason to have this. We already know everything we need to know about how deadly and how terrible the SARS-CoV-2 virus is. We don't need more gain-of-function research. This is a biological weapon. And it's been created by Boston University and people in the United States, not the evil Chinese. No, this one belongs to us. And every single one of those people need to be immediately investigated, indicted, and tried. for crimes against humanity. This is ridiculous. There's no point in any of this. And by the way, if I'm wrong, if you happen to be a virological scientist and so on and so forth, and you can explain to me what any possible good something like this could be, by all means, give me a call. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Explain it to me. You tell me why it's necessary that we even have one of these monsters lurking around. Well, it's okay. We've got it behind closed doors. You don't have to worry about it. Class A lab, my God, we've got this covered. Yeah, I don't believe you. I just don't believe you. Let me ask you a question. Okay? What would stop the next generation of Al-Qaeda terrorists from trying to do their absolute dead level best to penetrate that lab, take that virus out of there? What would stop them? Outrageous. Okay, economic news today. The Federal Reserve has once again raised interest rates by 75 basis points. That is 3/4 of a percentage point. The move came as the Fed continues to fight inflation. It hit 8.3% annually in August. A slight improvement from July, remains near the 40-year high set this year, and is much higher than the central bank's preferred 2% annual average. Good God. Good heavens to Betsy. Okay, I don't know who's calling right now, but I do need to find out. The Wells Report, good afternoon. Hello? Can I help you? Bye-bye now. All right. Anyway, so the increased federal funds rate also increases interest rates on products such as personal loans, mortgages, student loans, credit cards. The rate hike brings the federal funds rate to a targeted range of 3% to 3.25%, and the Fed anticipates that more rate hikes are on the horizon, as it is strongly committed to returning inflation to 2% instead of 8.3%. It was actually 8.2% in September. I don't know why this is Fox Business News. I have no idea why they are quoting month-old statistics. If you want to take advantage of interest rates before they move higher, you would consider taking out a personal loan to pay down high-interest debt at a lower rate. Okay? While the Federal Reserve maintains its monetary policy and forecasts more rate hikes, it indicated that bringing down inflation could take longer than previously anticipated. No kidding. Yeah, that's why you try to do everything you possibly can not to touch off inflation, which is exactly what the Rescue America plan did. Yeah, we rescued ourselves right into a recession. And by the way, there are reports today, 100% chance of a recession. We're already in it. You don't believe me? Go buy some groceries. At 3%, the rate is now above what most members consider it to be the long-term level and should be effective in reducing demand and slowing inflation over time. This according to Mike Frattantoni, Mortgage Bankers Association, Senior Vice President and Chief Economist. The members' projections indicate a slower growth, slowly decelerating inflation, and a federal funds rate that will likely top out well over 4%. The surprise for the market might be the median expectation that they could increase rates to 4.4% by the end of this year. Like I said, a recession's inevitable. There's no way they can stop it. As a matter of fact, that's what they're doing. And you're saying, why are they doing this on purpose? As I've told you before, recessions damage economies. They do. Recessions are uncomfortable, and they're difficult, and they cost people immeasurable amounts of pain. But inflation will destroy an economy. A recession hurts it, but inflation destroys it. Let's go to CNBC and see what the markets are doing. CNBC.com. What are they doing on the news? Let's see. Actually, very interesting. Volatile trading. Strong earnings are boosting stocks for a second day, but that's before the news hits. They're up 326 points. All the major indicators are up. Okay, so we'll see what happens tomorrow. All right. The Fed releases another 3/4 of a percentage point increase in the federal funds rate as they try to get control of inflation. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Yeah, somebody said, John David, it's another telemarketer trying to scam you. No, you think? We'll be back with more of the Wells Report. This is the end of hour number 1. Hour number 2 right around the corner. So I will see you around that corner next on the Wells Report. Okay, a little rough start, but that's a good effort. Let's do second hour. See you then. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. What do we do here? We report the news, honestly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We depropagandize news to the very best of our ability. I make commentary. That's not the news. That is simply opinion. But I'll tell you this. That opinion is just as valuable as yours. So share it. And that's the debate part. So news, analysis, commentary, debate. This is the Wells Report live every single day, well, Monday through Friday, from 2 until 5 Central Time, and wherever you can find us on podcasts on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, and Facebook. We have an election coming up in 21 days. It is perhaps the most important midterm election this nation has ever faced. Why? Well, because we find ourselves in a situation that this country has never faced. And that is the willingness of the government to operate to its benefit and not our own. The political parties have abandoned the Constitution, both of them. The Republican Party works to enable the Democrat Party, as opposed to actually being a genuine adversary. And what we end up with is this, this government that is more like a regime. As we come to this particular conversation, that regime is responsible for abandoning functioning U.S. energy infrastructure in favor of some leftist scheme that controls energy for all the people by virtue of something that they can turn off anytime they wish. I mean, this is a very, very dangerous set of circumstances being put in place right in front of us. And yeah, there are people that are warning about it. I'm one of them. But we're going to find out in this election whether those warnings are actually being heard. We're also going to find out something else. We're going to find out whether or not the Republicans will abandon their long-term strategy of gaining power and doing nothing. I said yesterday on this broadcast, I don't believe that the Republican Party is strong enough to lead a great nation. This country needs the Conservative Party of the United States, a party that stands for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and needs to do so without playing games. It's essential. And I sincerely hope that this election will be one of those watershed moments. We have a fork to the left and the right. I certainly hope we take the right fork this time. The Hill reports Democrats have cause for concern that their outrage regarding the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade may indeed have happened too soon in this election cycle. And the outrage is fading as more and more people pay more and more for gasoline, and more for groceries, and more for energy. And inflation is extremely high and getting worse. The Fed is doing their absolute dead level best to keep it from continuing. They raised the federal funds rate another 0.75 of a percentage point today. Nobody's reporting it, but here it is. The markets will likely react tomorrow. A New York Times Siena College poll released on yesterday, found Republicans held a 49-45 lead over Democrats in the generic ballot roughly 1 month before November's elections. As gasoline prices go up, history teaches us that number is going to get bigger for Republicans and smaller for Democrats. It represents a shift from last month. The same poll found Democrats leading Republicans by 1 percentage point. This is a 5-point swing. The poll followed a trend among other surveys that as recently as late September showed Democrats leading Republicans on the generic ballot, only for the lead to shrink or disappear altogether. Strategists say the shifts in fortunes for Democrats is a matter of timing. Ethan Winter, an analyst for the progressive group Data for Progress, says the Democrat outlook improved over the summer as the Supreme Court decision striking down Roe v. Wade coincided with falling gas prices, and economic reports indicated that inflation was cooling. I don't know, by the way, where Ethan Winter got that information. Inflation isn't cooling. Prices have been going up steadily that entire time. I don't know what he's talking about. Probably because he doesn't know what he's talking about. But let's move on. He says, quote, the inflation outlook improved a little bit. Gas prices fell, but then got worse again. The momentum this cycle is tracked with these sorts of baseline economic indicators. No kidding. He also noted that Democrats began spending on advertisements in key battleground states earlier than Republicans, leading some Senate candidates in particular to open up polling leads that have since dissipated. In states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, Republicans went on to air their own ads. Democrats appeared to turn a midsummer hot streak into real momentum with voters, renewing hope for a strong showing in November. Gas prices in August came down dramatically from $5 per gallon. Congress passed bipartisan legislation to spur investment in semiconductor computer chips and made another profit opportunity for Paul Pelosi. And the Democrats coalesced around a $740 billion bill to fight climate change and lower health care costs. That's strange because it was supposed to fight inflation. It's not working. Multiple summer polls showed Democrats either even with Republicans or leading. Make that August 17th. The Politico Morning Consult poll showed Democrats leading by 4 percentage points. A poll from the news outlet September 28th said Democrats were still leading by 2 percentage points. The September 30th poll from Yahoo News and YouGov found Democrats ahead of the GOP by, again, 4 percentage points. Those polls spurred confidence among Democrat leaders. The party was in position not just to stave off big Republican gains, but perhaps add to its majority in the House and Senate, despite overwhelming historic trends. The president's party tends to lose seats in midterm elections. That gave Nancy Pelosi an opportunity to say, I believe we're going to hold the House. President Biden voiced optimism. So far, it looks like the Senate may hold, but we also might pick up a couple of seats. They're dreaming. The political landscape has now changed. It happened to Democrats in a very short amount of time. They're on defensive. Inflation accelerated for the second straight month. Prices up at a faster pace than expected. Consumer prices showed inflation rose 0.4%. But core inflation, the producer price index, up a bunch. The average price of gas, $3.89. This according to AAA data. It's up 20 cents. President Biden has lately argued that inflation will get worse if Republicans win. That's interesting, by the way. I want to point this out because once again, nobody's really talking about this. No matter who wins the election in 2022, inflation is going to continue to move up. Now, there may be pressures just by virtue of the results of the election that may tamp this stuff down if Republicans, say, for example, take control of the House and Senate. That may tamp that down just a little bit. But the actual structural problems, all this money in the economy, energy costs way up, are going to take some time to fix. If Republicans indeed take over the House and the Senate, one of the first things they're going to do is they're going to reopen American energy production. But remember, Joe Biden is still going to be the president. He will likely veto most of those bills. There will likely be an effort to override those vetoes. They may or may not be successful, depending on whether or not the Republicans actually take power. So once again, if indeed energy, which is at the key, it's at the cause of all of this. It's, like I said, a perfect storm created by all of this money from the government being spent on the economy. $1.92 trillion. Good heavens. And then a cut in U.S. energy production. this harebrained scheme of taking away oil, natural gas, and coal because they're just dirty. They're just terrible. They'll destroy the planet. Yeah, okay. Well, what also destroys the planet? Let's see. Let's go back to the 30s. There was something called the Great Depression. That ended with World War II. So what are they doing? What are they doing? I have no idea. All I can tell you is that we have a chance to reverse this trend, and we had better take it, in my humble opinion. We had better take it. We better do something in this election. The problem with it is that the only other alternative are Republicans. Republicans enable the Democrat Party instead of trying to defeat them. The Democrats don't have any problems defeating Republicans, but they sure somehow they are able to weasel their way into the Republican caucus to get their agenda continually passed. Why is that? Well, because the Republican Party is feckless, or we keep electing the wrong Republicans. We better do something about that. If we don't, none of this is going to matter. We have a chance. We have a chance to show progressives the door. We have a chance to show leftist politics the door. We'd better take it. Just one little thing. You know, the idea of moving forward with energy technology, that's fine. I don't have any problem with that, but that's going to take better batteries, and that's going to take superconductors. Instead of investing in this strange idea of solar panels and windmills, we'd better start working on high science of a new superconductor that works at room temperature, that's easy to produce, that is cost effective, that transmits electricity a whole heck of a lot better than copper wire, which, by the way, is archaic, it's ancient, et cetera, et cetera. So what we need to do is we need to get a hold of this, but fast. There's somebody on the chat room that says, I hear stories about elections being shut down and so much happening. Yeah, don't be fearful. Don't be fearful. Because once again, I suspect that elections will cool off just a little bit from a standpoint of what miscreancy might be afoot. One, President Trump is not on the ballot. And so the extraordinary measures taken to defeat him will probably not be in place this time. We'll see. We'll see how badly the Democrats want to hang on to power. We'll see. You're listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. There's more of this. We're going to cover it here in just a couple of moments. So, once again, this polling information is polling information. But did Democrats move too quickly? You know, outrage is temporary. Outrage is temporary. You can absolutely rev up a whole bunch of people a whole bunch of times. And you can get everybody yelling and walking in the streets, screaming and so on and so forth. But, you know, that fades very quickly. And that's what we're seeing right now. Now let's see if we can get this country back on track. This is the Wells Report. Back in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Feel free to use that anytime you'd like. Also, you can join us on the chat room. Looking forward to hearing from you. You can find the chat room on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We'll have a broadcast up on Rumble a little bit later on today. We'll put this broadcast up there and hope you enjoy it. A programming note, by the way, tomorrow's show will be 2 hours instead of 3. Okay, 2 hours instead of 3. I will explain why coming up a little bit later on. Okay, but our show will be a little bit shorter. There is a good reason. I'll explain as I get going. Let's see. Gary Abshire is going to go get his flu shot. I've got to do that too. I take a flu shot every year. It has really helped my health. It really has. I started when I first moved to Texas and got the genuine flu. I thought I was going to perish. If it wasn't for Tamiflu, I'm sure I would have been miserable. And I said, enough is enough. I'm starting to take flu shots. They've worked perfectly. They've really helped my immune system, too. I never had a cold until I got COVID after I took the 3 COVID shots. So there you go. So anyway, alrighty then, back to work as we continue our show today. Real Clear Politics has come up with a projection regarding the United States Senate following the 2022 election. They see the Republican Party picking up 2 seats for a 48 Democrat, 52 Republican majority in the United States Senate. The House of Representatives looks like that is going to be a Republican win as well. So there we go. We'll see whether that works or not. I'm hoping that indeed we see a better America at the end of that at the end of this election. So here's what's going on. Real Clear Politics, that is an amalgam. It's a combination of all the current polling and so on and so forth, and they make projections based on that. According to them, they see Mark Kelly in Arizona winning that election. They call it a Democrat hold. I'm not sure that's going to be the case. I'm looking at Arizona, and I just don't know. We'll see. They think that that Nevada will be a GOP pickup. They believe that the GOP will win the Pennsylvania race. They believe New Hampshire will stay in the hands of Hassan. I don't know the guy's first name or the woman's first name. They predict a December 6th runoff between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. Okay. And then they believe that the GOP will hold races for the Senate in North Carolina, Florida, Wisconsin, and Ohio, leaving a 52-48 Republican majority in the United States Senate. As people had been talking about this particular election, they'd been saying that essentially what was going to happen was the House was pretty much locked up by the Republicans. But the problem was going to be the United States Senate. Well, it looks like the worm has turned. In other words, it looks like indeed the Republican Party may indeed take over the Senate. Now, what will that mean? I hate to be a buzzkill, to use the words of former President Barack Obama yesterday. I hate to be a buzzkill, but with a Democrat president, something tells me the Republican Party will find a way to reach out to the president and work in a bipartisan fashion for the good of the country. You know, there are just times when the alphas need to step up. It looks to me like when you start looking, there are a handful of alpha politicians in the Republican Party, just a bare handful. And the rest of them are betas. And I got to be honest with you, Mitch McConnell is the poster child for Republicans that are afraid to win. And we had better get over that butt fast. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for being a part of our broadcast so far today. We'll continue here in just a couple of moments. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. The Academy is a generic term for the university and college system in the United States. The Academy. Our best and brightest are sent to those institutions to become better educated to the benefit, theoretically, of the United States of America. As we have seen, both from the 60s and the 70s, there are times when the university system fails us. There's a perfect example of that. Ilhan Omar. She's a member of the House of Representatives from Minnesota. Ilhan Omar came to the United States at age 9 from Somalia as the result of crushing poverty and deprivation and a terrible, terrible life. She was nourished, nurtured, loved, and cared for, and given advantages that no one in Somalia would ever even come close to having. She went through her schooling here in the United States, ended up in a university where she learned how to become the anti-American, leftist, progressive socialist that we see today. She came here when she was 9. She didn't have any of those leanings when she got here. No, we gave them to her. Which, of course, cements the idea that the Academy is doing its absolute dead level best to turn the United States into what? The Soviet Union 2.0? Ernesto Che Guevara. He died in October of 1967. He was an Argentine Marxist revolutionary, physician, writer, guerrilla leader, diplomat, military theorist. He was a major figure in the Cuban Revolution. His stylized visage has become a ubiquitous counterculture symbol of rebellion and global insignia in popular culture, and that's been for a very long time. The picture, he was a devastatingly handsome guy. They took a picture. It was taken by Alberto Corda on the 5th of March, 1960. And it was turned into a poster that did indeed represent American counterculture in the late 60s and 70s. You've seen it. You know exactly what I'm talking about. He had something to do with the Cuban Revolution. He played a key role in the new government after that revolution was successful, included reviewing the appeals and firing squads for those convicted as war criminals during the revolutionary tribunals. Yeah, he instituted an agrarian land reform as the Minister of Industries, helping spearhead a successful nationwide literacy campaign, serving as both president of the National Bank and instructional director for the Cuban Armed Forces. He traversed the globe as a diplomat on behalf of Cuban socialism. He was allowed to play a central role in training military forces who repelled the Bay of Pigs invasion and bringing Soviet nuclear-armed ballistic missiles to Cuba. He left Cuba in 1965 to foment a continental revolution across both Africa and South America, first unsuccessfully in Kinshasa, and in Bolivia, where he was captured by CIA-assisted Bolivian forces and summarily executed. Yeah, this guy killed a lot of people. He was a degenerate communist. And for whatever reason, mainly tradition, I suppose, university students are hear from their elder professors about Che Guevara and Marxist theology and all of this wonderful counterculture stuff, this American capitalism. Well, that is still in effect at least the University of Illinois, Chicago. One of the UIC officials were seen on video demanding that an anti-Marxist display set up by conservative students be removed from a sidewalk at the public university. It's a public university. The public meaning the United States of America. You know, First Amendment, Constitution, First Amendment, you know, stuff like that, free speech. The official said, quote, "There's a difference between public property and state property." Yeah, this official, identified by the Young American Foundation as Associate Director of UIC's Center for Student Involvement, Vance Pierce. Quote, "Public property is anybody can set up outside on the sidewalk. There's no issue. But inside, we do have policies that we're trying to share with you," unquote. You mean impose, don't you, sir? Chapter members for the Young Americans for Freedom established a table on the sidewalk October 10th for a Young Americans for Freedom sponsored event called No More Che Day. That is a noble cause, by the way. The Young American Foundation sponsored No More Che Day on the anniversary of Che Guevara's death at college campuses across the country for years to educate students about his, quote, "vicious campaigns to impose communism on countries throughout Latin America," unquote. YAF students were handing out literature regarding Guevara's history at a table set up outside. Yeah. And there is a video, and I will now attempt to bring this up for you. Wish me luck. Let me see what I can do here. Do I want to do this? Yeah, I probably do. Let me go over here. I'll get this going on Twitter, and then I'll come over here, and then I'll hit go. Let me make sure that this is up so that you can hear it, and I will switch this over to here, and we can hope that all of this works. Cross your fingers.
What I'm trying to tell you is across the street on the sidewalk, that's the open space where you can set up and do whatever. So I'm just trying to explain to you how it's implemented.
Because the sidewalk is also public property.
Correct.
This is public property.
No, indoor it's not.
Therefore, this is not indoor.
It's indoor the circle of the buildings. It's not just open to anybody. That's what I'm trying to explain. So when you define it as public property, there's a difference between public property and state property. Public property is anybody can set up outside on that sidewalk. There's no issue. But inside, we do have some policies that we're trying to share with you so that you can just follow. Can I have your ID?
I don't have any ID.
You don't have an ID?
I left everything in my car.
You don't? What about you? Do you have your university ID?
I didn't need it.
Because I'm now at this point, because you're kind of refusing, I'm going to go through the process. I'm telling you to leave. You would be considered not following the university directive. That's the issue. Then you start the process. I can file a complaint with the Dean of Students office.
All right, we'll back up.
But at this point, can I also have some identification of who I've been speaking to?
Wait, who's cooking us out? You?
Yeah.
Wait, who are you?
That one.
That's wrong.
I identified myself when I walked up, but that's okay.
I'll get out here right now.
Yeah. So there you go. The guy didn't want to tell them who they were when I guess the video was rolling. Let me point this out one more time. Leftism, progressivism, socialism, communism cannot exist without dishonesty. It can't exist without dishonesty. There's no difference between state and public property. The student should have said, you know what? Go ahead and call the dean. I think that'll be fine. But he backed off. And that was a mistake. That was a mistake. And that was a dang shame. That was too bad. I really wish that they would have stuck to their guns. But they didn't. And so this college went ahead and shut this down. And the reason they shut it down is because this person, and I'm thinking it's Vance Pierce. Yeah, Vance Pierce. You know, this guy is a hardcore yet ignorant Marxist communist that is offended that kids are actually out there saying, hey, you know, Che Guevara was a communist thug. Okay, we need to get rid of this guy. All right? We really do. And so that's what they've been doing on college campuses all over the country on the anniversary of Che Guevara's execution in Bolivia. Which, by the way, is a noble effort, and I applaud the kids for doing it. Look, our nation's universities are the cradle of American communism, American socialism, American Marxism. And these tin pot communist demigods believe they can push kids around. And they do it. I got to be honest with you. I had a really good opportunity to go to college, which I did not do for a couple of different reasons. By the time college came around, I was pretty sure I was going to be in radio. And you can't learn, in my humble opinion, although there are a lot of people that went to college radio that will argue with me on this point, I really don't believe at that time, and I didn't believe, that you could learn radio in a college. You had to go out and actually do it. And so I did. I have a good high school education. I do. I also have an incredible radio education based on the fact that I worked with giants of this industry for decades. So I have no problem with my credentials. You know, as a news guy, you know, everybody says, well, you didn't go to college. Well, neither did Peter Jennings. Peter Jennings didn't graduate from high school. And neither did Walter Cronkite. I'm in good company. Simple case of the matter is, my lack of education hasn't hurt me none. I can read the writing on the wall. And oh, by the way, in the last 23 years or 22 years of the Wells Report, you know what I've done? I have researched everything that I've come to this microphone to tell you about. Everything. I got a pretty good education after all. And certainly better than what people are getting at universities that are trying to forestall this idea, this romantic baloney, that Che Guevara is some counterculture hero. The academy is screwing this nation up, and they need to flipping stop it. And this idea that Marxism is alive and well in American universities needs to come to a crashing halt. As everyone knows, Marxism is inhuman. It requires people to do things well outside of human nature. And what ends up happening is that you end up with guys just like this Vance Pierce dude that like to push people around. This is a perfect microcosm of socialist governance. It is. It's perfect. We don't need that here. We don't need that here. Effective immediately, if I was calling the shots, I would send a terse, straightforward letter to the administration of the University of Illinois, Chicago, and I would say, you need to show cause, specific and comprehensive cause, as to why federal dollars, any federal money that's coming to the University of Illinois, Chicago, should not be immediately curtailed to the point of being gone. In other words, we're going to remove your federal funding because you're not teaching America. You're teaching communism. Don't get me wrong. You have to learn Marxist economic thought, economic philosophy, so that you can know what a good sounding idea that turns into a nightmare. In other words, a good idea in a vacuum that becomes a nightmare in reality. But that's not what they're saying. Because these people do live in a vacuum. They don't actually have to go out and do anything in the actual world. So they think their comfortable little Marxist ideology is just fine. And I'm going to impose it on you. And if you disagree, you're going to get a lousy grade. That's going to stop. It has to stop. And I don't know you know, I look at this and I go, okay, so the Academy, they look at this and they go, well, we have just as much right to say what we want to say as anybody else has to. Well, yeah, that's true. But you see, what's interesting, when somebody disagrees with you, you find some pretext to get rid of them. Like, well, you're on the wrong part of the sidewalk. You see, if you were on the outside, you'd be doing that. But and there's a difference between state property and public property. No, it's all public property, Mr. Pierce. You see, you're just a communist jerk. That's what would have come out of my mouth had I been standing behind that table. Go ahead and call the dean. We'll see you at the hearing. Now get out of the way, because we really want to start promoting why America is better than Cuba. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. There's a chat room out there that you should use. Give it a shot. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Let's see what's going on. Speaking education, if we pay for someone's college and in return they get taxed to pay for someone's college, correct? Let's see. Speaking of education, if we pay for someone's college, they in return get taxed to pay for someone's college, correct? No. That's not the way it works. No, because what's going to happen is you're talking about the loan forgiveness plan from the government, from President Biden, who, by the way, put this thing out in public yesterday. Still hasn't been challenged legally. Don't know why that's the case. Don't have any idea why nobody's challenged this. The president on his own hook cannot spend $1.7 trillion. I have no idea what they're doing. These are the same people that said, You can't have a dang dictator as president. That dang Trump, he just can't rule by executive order. Joe Biden shows up. Well, it's what needs to happen. We need to be able to do this. We need to have the president giving away $1.7 trillion. What are you talking about? Boneheads. So what happens is that, no, what's going to happen is we're going to pay these loans and it's going to be a mess and it's going to add to inflation because, once again, the people that are making these decisions have no flaming clue about economics at all. Okay, so that's going to happen. And then what's going to happen? They're going to realize it was a disaster and they'll never do it again. Right? Unbelievable. And guess what? It's not just college. I don't know what I understand what they're trying to do with college, but check this out. The majority of U.S. millennials, 72%, owe roughly $117,000 in non-mortgage debt. This does make it hard for them to save or plan for the future. Duh. This, by the way, from Fox Business News. Real Estate Witch surveyed 1,000 millennials, the generation born between 1981 and 1996, about their finances, savings, credit card history, and said these debt holders struggle to pay for basic expenses. 27% of those surveyed said they could not afford gasoline. 29% said they could not afford their mortgage. 27% said they could not afford medical care. The majority of survey respondents said they believed they could repay their debt in 5 years. However, 1 in 10 respondents said they believed it would take at least a decade to repay. 1 in 16 said that they would never be able to pay off their debt. The generation's debt burden may also have made it more difficult to afford discretionary expenses, such as a vacation. That could improve their quality of life, said Real Estate Witch. It also may be explaining why millennials are slow to reach traditional markers of adulthood, like starting a family. If you're struggling financially, yeah, and so on and so on. The survey said that the biggest culprit of millennium debt is credit card spending. 67% of respondents are carrying a balance that averages $5,349. Credit card debt jumped by $46 billion, or 13% by the end of the second quarter 2022, the biggest percentage increase in more than 20 years, this according to the Federal Reserve. It's the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. In addition to credit card balances, Americans also opened up 233 million new credit card accounts during the second quarter, the most since 2008. More than a quarter of survey respondents, 29%, reported not paying their credit card bill in full every month. 23% of these delinquent borrowers have over $10,000 in debt. Among millennials, credit card debt tends to increase with age. Yeah. Geriatric millennials who are farther along in their credit journey carry an average credit card balance of $6,048, about 20% more than younger millennials. Yeah. Yeah, so once again, you add credit card debt to student loan debt, and you see an opportunity to buy votes if you're the Democrat Party, and so you come up with some way of trying to reduce as much of that debt as possible, and it works out to $10,000 to $20,000. Except it doesn't solve the problem, does it? No, it does not solve the problem. Yep. And so what we've done is we've trained an entire generation to not have any clue about basic economics. Like, don't get a credit card. That's a huge mistake. Just leave it alone. Put money in the bank. Like 10%. It's amazing how fast that grows. Pay attention to your money. Do the right thing. All will be well. Bury yourself in credit debt, you'll never catch up. Never catch up. It's true. You never will. So I hope that what ends up happening is that these kids are able to work their way out of debt. It's hard, but it's possible. So do your absolute dead level best. You might have to work 2 jobs for a while, but may I suggest that you do it when you're young? Because it's a lot easier to work 2 jobs for 10 years when you're in your 20s. than it is to work 2 jobs for 10 years in your 50s. It's just really kind of a drag. Ugh. You're watching the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. This is the end of hour number 2. Hey, JD, brilliant idea. Let's forgive all debt, credit card, mortgage, loan, everything else. Let's enact a guaranteed annual or monthly income. Certainly, Commissar. He's being sarcastic. Absolutely. Our daughter racked up a lot on credit cards living off campus, bartending while in college. Yeah. Well, you just don't know what you don't know. And when it catches up, it's a very, very bad day. You're listening and watching the Wells Report. Back with hour number 3 next. Okay. There you go. One more hour approaching. See you in a minute. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. What do? We bring you news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary and we debate. An important thing that you need to know is the commentary is my opinion, just as valuable as yours. But it is absolutely not the news. My opinion is not news. I may be the only news commentator in the United States that says that. I don't believe that everything that I say should be taken down and held to the bosom of every American, like some people think. I am your neighbor. I am not your oracle. What I want to do is I just want to make sure you know important things that happen every single day as we do this as a part of the first draft of history. We start today with breaking news, at least this hour of the Wells Report, hour number 3, by the way. Igor Danchenko, a consultant whose information comprised the bulk of the 2016 Steele dossier, debunked, fraudulent, wrong, was acquitted today of lying to the FBI, leaving special counsel John Durham with losses in both cases he's taken to trial as his years-long inquiry into the FBI investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election winds down. This, by the way, from the Wall Street Journal. Over 4 days in federal court outside Washington, D.C., Mr. Durham sought to portray Mr. Danchenko as fabricating one of his own sources and concealing another one when the FBI questioned him in 2017 about where he obtained allegations he provided to ex-British spy Christopher Steele, who was paid by Democrat operatives to collect opposition research on then-presidential candidate Donald Trump and his alleged ties to the Kremlin, which, by the way, were absolutely disproven. Several of Mr. Durham's own FBI witnesses appeared to undercut his allegations. FBI witnesses, and said they believed that Mr. Danchenko had been truthful. Mr. Steele gave the dossier to the FBI, whose efforts to verify what was in the memos included interviewing Mr. Danchenko. Much of what was in the document has since been discredited, but its compilation and how it was handled by the Federal Bureau of Investigation became a central focus of Mr. Durham after he was appointed by then-Attorney General William Barr. In 2019, Mr. Durham, a longtime federal prosecutor often tapped for sensitive investigations into government misconduct, was then U.S. Attorney for Connecticut. Mr. Durham spent key parts of the trial criticizing decisions the FBI made in the Russian inquiry. Quote, "The government is just trying to stretch the facts to make something out of nothing," said Mr. Danchenko's attorney, Stuart Sears. He was trying to help the FBI, and now they're prosecuting him for it. Well, the FBI isn't prosecuting him for it. The FBI is working as hard as they possibly can, successfully, to clear Danchenko from any kind of accountability for what was a fraudulent dossier. The jury deliberated for 9 hours before finding Mr. Danchenko not guilty on 4 counts after the judge dismissed the 5th on Friday. The other case Mr. Durham took to trial, a lawyer for the 2016 Clinton campaign, Michael Sussman, was acquitted of lying to the FBI about his motives for bringing the Bureau separate research allegedly linking Mr. Trump to Russia. We've known all along that Mr. Danchenko was innocent. We're happy now the American public knows that as well, says Mr. Sears. Mr. Durham said, while we're disappointed in the outcome, we respect the jury's decision, thank them for their service. And then they go on to talk about Mr. Durham's inquiry costing more than $4 million since October of 2020 when Mr. Barr, Attorney General Barr, converted his appointment into a special counsel to ensure it would continue through the Biden administration. He's expected to issue a report of his findings in the coming months, wrapping up this saga, as quoted by the Wall Street Journal, that began in the spring of 2016, rippling across Washington ever since. The FBI first investigated the Trump campaign in 2016 after an Australian diplomat relayed that Trump had been offered help from Russia. It later received the dossier and used some of its material in an application to surveil a Trump campaign foreign policy advisor. That was Carter Page. There was fraudulent manipulation of evidence in that particular trial. That was Mr. Sussman. That's why he was charged. There was no doubt that he altered the information that was then used to grab FISA warrants to continue the spying on the Trump campaign. The trial at times delved into the minutiae. The FBI inquiry, ground that had previously been trod in a lengthy Inspector General's report in 2019 that found major errors in how the FBI obtained the surveillance of the former advisor. But it also shed new light on some of the allegations in connection between Mr. Trump and Russia, providing a window into both the scramble the FBI had to determine the validity of the allegations and into how, even years later, basic facts remain in dispute. This, of course, does not touch on the fact that the FBI offered Christopher Steele $1 million to prove the allegations in the Steele dossier, and he couldn't do it. This is merely opinion. Notice that I differentiate between news and opinion on this broadcast. This is only opinion. When this all came down, what I said at the time, and continue to say, is that both the FBI and the DOJ had completed a sorry chapter in their history regarding the attempt to, quote, get Donald Trump. Everything that they brought to the table was discredited and should have been, because it's not true. And yet they went on with it. The FBI knew that it was untrue, but they went on with it because they had an opportunity to look basically down the pants of the Donald Trump campaign. And, oh, by the way, the Donald Trump transition. And, oh, by the way, the Donald Trump administration. Unsuccessfully at every turn, being able to pin anything on Donald Trump. Now, I said at the time, and will continue to say, that the FBI, it's going to take decades for them to reclaim their credibility and their standing with the people of the United States. In this sorry chapter of political prosecution, both the DOJ and the FBI have sullied their reputation, like I said, for decades to come. And they deserve it. Meanwhile, lying to the FBI is a real problem for anyone not supporting Donald Trump. Well, not supporting the FBI idea that Donald Trump is some sort of arch criminal. Michael Flynn, nailed by the FBI for lying. Others nailed by the FBI for lying. And the thing about it is that now, when it came time to prosecute people that actually lied, well, they just didn't do it. They just didn't do it. That gets back to that dual legal system. A legal system for non-progressive Americans and a legal system for progressive Americans. Guess who's not going to jail? That's right, progressive Americans. This is bad. This is really bad. And also, it points out to something else that I'm going to point out here while I have a chance. And that gets us to the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is the U.S. capital. It's a compact city on the Potomac River. It borders the states of Maryland and Virginia. It's defined by imposing neoclassical monuments and buildings, including iconic ones that house the federal government's three branches. It is 68.34 miles in square miles. Its population is 701,974 people, according to the 2020 census. It is leftist par any kind of reason. And that's why Igor Danchenko was able to beat the charges brought against him by John Durham. It's also how Michael Sussman was able to beat those charges. A Washington, D.C. jury is going to be a leftist, progressive, socialist, anti-American group of people who will find for the progressive ideal, as opposed to the American one. Now, you don't have to believe me on this. One of the great things about all this stuff, all you have to do is wait. Because these people now feel that they are empowered. They believe that they're empowered. They believe that they can do this anytime they want to. They don't have to worry about it. The Wall Street Journal will come out as they did and say, well, this was a foolish endeavor from the beginning. But there's a big difference between right and legal. Legal is where it's possible to skate on what are absolutely egregious breaches of American law. And I got to be honest with you. They should have asked for a change of venue. They should have taken that to a federal court someplace else. Now, don't get me wrong, at least they should have petitioned for it. Because this is a Republican effort to try to nail down some of this anti-Americanism. You know, while we're in a position where they're trying to essentially cover up all of this, that leaves questions that are unanswered. And leaves doubts. At least among people who can see the writing on the wall. There are people, even on this chat room, that are the useful idiots that empower socialism, communism, duality in the legal system, a nation of politics, not law, and so on. But at the time all this came down, I said, you know, this is so big, I wonder how they're going to fix it. I called for the dissolution of the FBI and a creation of a brand new federal law enforcement agency bound to the Constitution in its original charter. I call for the dissolution of the Department of Homeland Security, a gigantic behemoth bureaucracy that is victimized by politics at every turn. And it doesn't, by the way, make any difference which political endeavor is being serviced by either of these organizations. Any political endeavor when it comes to federal law, any political endeavor when it comes to federal law is corrupt. This is a bad day for the United States of America. When it comes down to a legislature of 12 that refuse to see the reality in what is now clearly a dual legal system. A legal system for the left and a legal system for the right. And I'll leave it to you to decide which one is more draconian. It seems obvious. Yeah. You are watching the Wells Report. Thanks very much for doing so. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. We'll return coming up in just a couple of seconds with the rest of today's news as we bring that to you every day, Monday through Friday, for 3 hours between 2 and 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. Back with more in just a moment. Thanks for joining us. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Our chat room is open and available. You can find it on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. I sincerely appreciate your participation. There is a little bit of, well, I wouldn't say necessarily tragic news, but certainly it is one to mark. James McDivitt, who commanded the Apollo 9 mission, testing the first complete set of equipment that would go to the moon and land, has died. He was 93 years old. The mission to go to the moon was an amazing endeavor, started by a young president who said we should reach for the stars, and by golly, we did it. His career started in 1965. He was the commander of the Gemini 4 mission. His best friend and colleague, Ed White, made the first U.S. spacewalk. His photographs of Ed White floating in space outside the Gemini capsule are iconic. He decided not to go and land on the moon and become one of the very select few that made that trip. He decided what he was going to do was join the space agency as a program manager. He did so for 5 Apollo missions after the Apollo 11 moon landing. He died Tuesday, make that Thursday of last week, in Tucson, Arizona. In his first flight in 1965, McDivitt reported seeing something out there about the size and shape, about the shape of a beer can flying outside his Gemini spaceship. People called it a UFO. McDivitt would later joke he became, quote, a world-renowned UFO expert, unquote. Years later, he figured it was just a reflection of bolts in the window. Sure. Apollo 9, which orbited the Earth and did not go further, was one of the lesser remembered space missions of the Apollo program. In a 1999 oral history, McDivitt said it didn't bother him that it was overlooked. I could see why it would. You know, it didn't land on the moon. So it's hardly part of Apollo, but the lunar module was key to the whole program, and they tested it. Flying with the Apollo 9 crewmates Rusty Schweickart and Dave Scott, the great Dave Scott, McDivitt led the first in-space flight test of the lightweight lunar lander nicknamed Spider. Their goal was to see whether people could live in it, whether it could dock in orbit, and something that would become crucial in Apollo 13, whether the lunar module's engines could control the stack of the spacecraft. In other words, the joining of both the lunar lander and the Apollo command module stack. In other words, the command module and the service module. By the way, that did work, and also it made possible the rescue of the Apollo 13 astronauts as one layer of amazing scientific achievement, stacked beautifully on another, making the entire Apollo program possible. It was an amazing endeavor. It was just perfect. Early in training, McDivitt was not impressed with how flimsy the lunar module seemed. I looked at Rusty, he looked at me, and we said, oh my God, we're actually going to fly something like this? It was chintzy. It was like a cellophane and tinfoil put together with scotch tape and staples. The guys from Grumman would say, hey, wait a minute. Hold on a second. It's the first pure spacecraft. And we didn't have to build something that would go back through the atmosphere. By the way, in case you're wondering, the walls of the command module, made of alloyed aluminum and other things, were so thin they're only about the same thickness as a couple of sheets of aluminum foil. You could push your finger through the side of the spacecraft if you really worked at it. Certainly a ballpoint pen. But it worked. And we have flags on the moon because of it. Yeah. James McDivitt. James McDivitt. One of the great ones. Lost now to history. God bless him. And God bless his endeavors. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. The Wells Report is about news. That palette is broad, multicolored. There are a lot of things. There are a lot of things that are covered by this broadcast, and some of them are human. Gabrielle Blair was on the front page of USA Today yesterday. She is a Mormon mom. She has 6 kids, and she is someone who has come up with something that is kind of amazing. All right. She has a message for men and the women who love them. It's there in the title of her new book, which I will not relate to you. And the reason I won't relate it to you is well, it's not appropriate for a generalized audience. Okay. It does say something about male responsibility, a whole new way to think about abortion, published by Workman Publishing. It is out today, in fact. What she says is this: Blair is someone who says that men should be responsible for essentially female pregnancy. Now, this has been out there for a long time, and I find it interesting, okay? In 2015, she had a blog that led to a book that became a bestseller, Design Mom, How to Live with Kids, a Room-by-Room Guide. In the summer of 2018, she was growing frustrated by online discussions, most of them led by men, about women and their bodies that seemed to place the responsibility and blame for unwanted pregnancies on females. She started to vent on a Twitter thread that grew to 63 posts and then didn't do anything with it for a few months. The essence of her controlled fury comes down to her belief that unwanted pregnancies are utterly controllable when men take advantage of a precaution that is not under legal threat in any state of the union. Finally, during the contentious hearings to confirm Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, hearings that included allegations of sexual assault, Blair decided she had enough and hit send. Typical of her tweets was this no-nonsense introductions. I'm a mother of 6 and a Mormon. I have a good understanding of arguments surrounding abortion, religious and otherwise. I've been listening to men grandstand about women's reproductive rights, and I'm convinced men actually have zero interest in stopping abortion. Another tweet laid bare her stance that men, thanks to easily available and inexpensive male contraception, need to step up and play a much larger role in ensuring that abortion is not the de facto option for a woman. A woman can be, shall we say, promiscuous. That's not what's in the copy here. She could be the most promiscuous person in the entire world who loves lovemaking all day long and all night long. She'll never find herself with an unwanted pregnancy unless a man shows up and is irresponsible. Blair thought her passionate rant on behalf of women would not be heard. After all, her expertise was in design. But both content and delivery resonated. As of last spring, the thread had garnered 37 million impressions on Twitter, and that's not counting those who find the treatise on Facebook, Instagram, Medium, or her Design Mom blog. The thread has also been translated into many languages, including Japanese. As anticipated, responses continue to run the gamut from supportive. You women have taken all the risk and burden for long enough. Time for men to take responsibility, to critical. You're talking about irresponsible men and have disregard for the other part of the bargain. That Twitter thread and the response it generated led to her new book, which her publisher describes as a series of 28 brief arguments that make the case for moving the abortion debate away from controlling and legislating female bodies and onto men's lack of accountability in preventing unwanted pregnancies. By the way, she also talks about vasectomies for boys. Now, I'm going to just leave it there. If you want to know more, go to USA Today and search Gabrielle Blair, Gabrielle Blair, Blair. Okay. So, where are we with this discussion? As I said, one of the things I fell in love with in high school were the humanities. I think the humanities are genius. And the art forms and so on and so forth involved in the humanities are, well, speak for themselves, because it's what human beings do and how they express themselves in the various ways that are known to all of us. But what I also discovered through the humanities was humanity. And I've been watching as our world has unfolded and how human beings have interacted with each other for good or ill. And a lot of what I learned is endemic in this broadcast nearly every day. I talk about human nature. I talk about the basics of human interaction. I call out what I consider to be absolutely ridiculous, inhuman things: racism, bigotry, and so on. I also point out hypocrisy. In 1968, American pharmaceutical companies came up with what was called the pill, which was an oral contraceptive for women. There were all kinds of controversies about it regarding women's health, et cetera, et cetera. They spent a lot of time talking about it. And they were concerned that maybe what it was going to do was going to ruin women and their reproductive capabilities, long into the future. And it turned out not to be true. And then there was a concern that maybe the pill was going to cause various cancers that afflict women and so on and so forth. And that didn't turn out to be true. In fact, most research points to the fact that when women are on oral contraceptions, they have less of a chance of all those dread diseases instead of more of a chance. And through that came the women's movement. And through the women's movement came Roe v. Wade. And through Roe v. Wade came an era where women were in charge of the reproductive process in this nation. And I said, that makes sense. Women would say, my body, my choice. Okay, that makes sense too. Right up to the point where it's not your body, which makes it not your choice. The ridiculous wrestling match and purposeful myopia that leads our country into a point where we can't decide when a person is a person, as long as they are encased in a female, is one of those ridiculous and archaic primitive idiocies that is driven by politics and votes instead of good sense. Anyway, the simple case of the matter is that I heard all of these women saying that, keep your hands off my body or my uterus or my ovaries or any of that stuff. And again, I said, makes sense. Makes sense. I didn't have a daughter, but I often spent an awful lot of time wondering how I would handle the mysteries of feminism and the feminine as they grow through their life and get to the point where they have to make decisions like this. And as a father, not of daughters, I would have made it abundantly clear to my daughter that she was indeed responsible for her own body. and that she should take very good care of it. And that she should realize that she is the crucible of new life, should she choose to do so. And the responsibilities that go with the crucible of new life are plain and apparent. And if indeed you decide, since all of the things that came before her life and her growth to adulthood led to women being responsible for reproductive processes in the United States, then she had better actually move forward with that. And so, yeah, I would have made absolutely sure that she knew her way around contraception to protect herself from an unwanted pregnancy. And I would say, you are responsible for that circumstance. Well, now, wait a minute, John David. What about this Gabriel Blair person who says that men have responsibilities? Well, men do have responsibilities. If indeed you father a child with a woman, regardless of whether it's on purpose or not, you're responsible for that baby. You're responsible for their care and upkeep. You're responsible for their maintenance. You're responsible for making sure they have a warm place to live, food to eat, education, all of the things required by parents. And whether you're married to this person or not, you are obligated. Completely obligated. And this has been borne out by court decision after court decision after court decision, whether you're married or not. The simple case of the matter is, if you father a child, you have fathered a child. And you will discharge your masculine responsibilities, your fatherly responsibilities to that child. And that's something that Gabriel Blair just blows off as nothing. But then again, that's also endemic of society, isn't it? Blowing off men as nothing. Until somebody decides that unwanted pregnancies are the man's fault. Oh, really? Oh, really? You know, and that, of course, gets down into, what is the most effective contraception in the world? It works 100%. It's the word no. And for some reason, in this particular age of American society, a woman being responsible to herself and society itself, saying no is off the table, as if women were absent responsibility and accountability for their own sex life. That's not the case. That's simply not the case. They say, well, men should do this and men should do that if they don't want unwanted pregnancies. How about this? Women should be responsible for their bodies like they keep saying that they should, that they will have responsibility for their own bodies. Well, by golly, do it. But that responsibility includes realizing basic facts. You are the crucible of new life. If you don't want that fire burning, then take proper steps to make sure it doesn't happen, because you are the person that will be gestating. Oh, make no mistake. Men will be paying. Absolutely. They will absolutely be paying, whether they're married or not. You got a baby, a judge is going to say, you owe her $500, $600, $700 a month until that baby's 18 years old. And by the way, there are guys that shirk that responsibility. And I have the same answer for them that I've always had. Get up off your dead butt and do what you have to do to support your child, moron. And that comes from a guy who's done it without fail and will always discharge those responsibilities because I'm a man. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say, especially if you're a woman. What do you think? Is Gabriel Blair correct? Is it up to the man to decide who gets pregnant and who doesn't? Seems double standardish, doesn't it? It also seems like it turns away from reality to me, but maybe you can school me on it. Maybe you can help me out with that. My telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Chat room's open. Tell me why I got that wrong. Tell me why men are really the problem. Again. I can hardly wait. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. There's some people that have come up with this. Let's see. Let me read you some of these chats on the last conversation we just had. Gail says, babies are women's responsibility to take care of. If you don't want them, there are other women that can't have children that would love them. She also says that men are being feminized. So many parents get out of paying child support. Again, the criminals win. Gail says, whatever happened to strong men? I know we have some out here in America. Here I am. My mom had 4 children. She went to work. Men and women are guilty of not paying child support. And I said, yeah, but men pay the overwhelming portion of child support in this country, and they should. broken homes, where the mom and dad are not together anymore, and that's hard on children. Yeah, it's hard on children. It's also another nomination for non-adult behavior. You don't raise children in an argumentative home. You make your decisions. You don't have to leave. What you have to do is you have to be civil. You have to concentrate on your children. The greatest story of a divorced family came when I heard the story of a man and a woman who got married, and I think they had 4 kids. And they decided that they were done with each other. To hell with this, and they got divorced. But instead of destroying their family and destroying everything that were part of their children's lives, he moved upstairs, she lived downstairs, the kids lived in their house, in their same rooms. They had their lives, they got along together civilly, the kids grew, they went to college, everybody had their lives, and then they remarried. They worked through it. I had an incredibly difficult first marriage. And I raised my kids in a situation where, yeah, there were too many arguments. And then I realized I'm not arguing anymore. And I stopped. Because I wasn't going to contribute to it. Because I came to this knowledge through hard experience, not because of I read some book somewhere. And I stopped. I started loving on my kids. Started ignoring this person in my life who had given them to me. And she finally couldn't stand it anymore, so she took my kids away from me. And it damaged all of us badly. It's not that I come to these conclusions just because I'm just some guy playing a part. I suffered for these experiences. And yes, my kids did too. Once I realized that it was damaging them, I stopped. I finally just said, I'm not going to play this game. And then what ended up happening is that if it didn't stop, I took the kids somewhere. Come on, kids, let's go. I came back and found lots of my things broken because of that decision, including a Minolta SRT 101, which was an SLR camera that was the one I could afford, and it was fantastic. And she threw it up against a wall and broke it because she knew how much it meant to me. I love film. I love taking pictures. And she destroyed a lot of my stuff because the kids were gone and so on and so on. But at least the kids were gone and we went out and had fun. So when it comes down to all of this, when it comes down to females in charge of the reproductive process in the United States, I believe it makes sense. And I believe that men should be accountable for children that are gifts from God instead of the result of what is always ignorant planning. Let's have a baby. Sure. If you actually sit back and think about, should I have a baby or should I not have a baby? The answer is always no, because you have no idea what you're getting into. It's a leap of faith. And so when God gives you a baby, it's because God knows that you're ready. At least that's what I think. And embrace it. I paid over 15 years of child support. Lots and lots and lots of money. And it was painful and it was difficult. And I had to work incredibly hard. But it made me who I am. And yeah, I've made mistakes. And yes, I've got regrets. But after all is said and done, especially where my fatherhood is concerned, I can look in my mirror and I can see a good man. I have a clear conscience. And it was because of that incredible, insane experience. And God rewarded me. And he will you too. Don't be afraid if you have to work so many jobs in order just to make the boat float. One time I was working 6 jobs and had a shift that went for 3 days, and I didn't sleep because I had to go from one job to another just to make that check. But I made them. Enough about that. This has been the Wells Report. I hope you've enjoyed the show. See you tomorrow. And okie dokie. And I, as always, thank you immeasurably for joining us today. I appreciate it. Let's see. What else? Let's see. I learned from them too. Yep, indeed. Yep, indeed. All right, you guys. God bless all y'all. I'm going to head on out the door. Looks like I've got a band gig. Watch the Facebook page. There'll be more details. And I hope you can make the show. I'll talk to you later, okay? I'll have that probably tomorrow, okay? So take good care.